Yes, I'm doing that right now.
All right, it's 8:15. Let's go ahead and get started. Gary, do we have anything to report out of closed session?
No reportable action from our single closed session. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you. So we're on to open session and we have the consent calendar, and I will look to see if there's any members of the public who would like to comment on the consent calendar. And I don't see any hands raised. So bringing it back to the board, if I can get a motion, please.
Motion to approve Watanabe.
Second by Klein.
Great, thank you. It's been moved and seconded. So Auden,
All right, I will now call the roll. Leroy Munoz.
Abstain.
Leroy Munoz abstain. Sayak.
Aye.
Sayak, aye. Jones.
aye.
Jones, aye. Klein.
Aye.
Klein, aye. Constantine. Constantine. We can return to his vote later. Montano.
Aye.
Montano, aye. Flagger.
Yes.
Flagger, aye. Bybee. Bybee. We'll try again later. Abakoga.
Aye.
Abakoga, aye. Bert.
Yes.
Bert, aye. Willia.
Aye.
Willia, aye. Watanabe.
Aye.
Watanabe, aye. Mock.
Yes.
Mock, aye. Bybee. Bybee. Elahi.
Aye.
Elahi, aye. And Paul.
Yes.
Paul, aye. And is Bybee or Constantine present?
Constantine, aye.
Okay, great. Constantine, aye, and no Bybee. So with 13 ayes, 1 abstention, and 1 absent, the motion carries.
Great, thank you. On to the next item, which is the board priority, which is racial justice. And we're going to have a report recommendations on the Hate Prevention and Inclusion Task Force. And we're going to get a presentation by Supervisor Cindy Chavez. So welcome, Supervisor Chavez.
And she is rejoining as panelist.
Okay.
Hi, thank you so much. I'm sorry I got logged in and logged out. So there you go. So good evening, everyone. I hope you're all doing well. And you're still looking very bright-eyed and bushy-tailed, some of you, Steve. I'm really excited to be able to join you tonight to talk to you about the work being done by the Hate Prevention and Inclusion Task Force. And as you're probably aware, the task force was created following the tragic events in Gilroy at the Gilroy Garlic Festival shooting. The task force has been meeting regularly since February of 2021. And I chair that task force with a colleague from the city of San Jose, Councilmember Maya Esparza. And it's really a cross-sectoral effort. It's got a lot of members. I want to say a very special thank you to all of you on the Cities Association, because the task force of its advisory members, we have 2 from you, and one is Mayor Mariko Sayak and Council Member Margaret Abakoga. And I want to thank them very much for their leadership and partnership. As part of the work that we did, we created a partnership with San Jose State University and their research foundation, led by Dr. Kathleen Wong. And they led a series of work groups that led to a report with recommendations that the task force can bring to the Board of Supervisors, and frankly, to all of your cities as well. We'd love you to have a chance to review them and see what pieces of action you're interested in taking, or if there are other areas you think we should be looking at. The recommendations range from coordinating responses between law enforcement to education and community outreach programs, to resources and services for victims. The next step is our staff will report back at the April 22nd meeting with recommended partners for each recommendation. And let me say just a moment about what that means. So as an example, one of the highest priorities we got was creating a warm line for people to be able to call if they want to report a hate crime. How that gets pushed forward, who hosts it, who would help with that is the kind of work we want to detail so we can come back to you and determine which, if any of these priorities might be of interest to you. Some actions have already been taken, and this week Supervisor Lee and I requested the creation of a county ordinance that would ban the sale and possession of ghost guns and ghost guns parts in our jurisdiction. The reason we did that is we saw research that came from our partnership with San Jose State University that demonstrated that in many hate crimes, people purposefully use ghost guns because they can't be traced. And that is why we brought that to our committee. Where I hope you can play a leadership role is to continue sending wonderful leaders to work with us, and also to recognize that we're going to need a multi-sector approach for things like ghost guns, hate crime incidents, violence, crimes in our community. Really, the public education component can't be done without the partnership of the cities. And so we'll be looking forward to making sure that you all have a chance to review those recommendations and give us feedback. And I'm happy to take any questions about the work that we're doing.
Thank you, Supervisor Chavez. I don't know if Mariko or Margaret, if you wanted to also comment since you served on that task force.
That would be great.
Mariko.
I think in the interest of time, I'll just defer to what Supervisor Chavez has already said.
Okay.
And help guide it through our cities and see if we can get some agreement from our cities as well. Thanks.
All right. Any questions from the board? So I have a question, Supervisor Chavez. So I understand if a hate crime takes place, the punishment or the desire, for punishment, but how do you prevent, or is there a way to prevent those crimes from ever happening? Basically, how do you change the hearts and minds of people who would commit an act like that?
It's such a good question. And I know that many of you on this Zoom have really dedicated your life not only to public service, but to having deep and meaningful relationships with people cross-culturally, and it's really imbued as a part of who you are. I think one of the things that we're really taking a look at is being able to layer some work that we're already doing. So you may know this, but the county has an Office of Gender-Based Violence, and really it's about gender-based violence prevention. And one of the big bodies of work we're exploring is really pushing money into prevention, into elementary schools, to really do a better job of helping children, frankly, not learn the kind of negative stereotypes that we can learn about each other, learning much more how to communicate when there's a difference, understanding how to operate in an environment that's cross-cultural, multicultural in a place like where we live. And so the idea, we think, is being able to spend enough money to have those integrated experiences at a very, for prevention activities at a very young age. The second part of that is that there's a high level of interest, and I found this very interesting, and a little bit of this was generational, but there's a high level of interest that when a crime like this is committed, that we're looking at restorative justice practices rather than just kind of throwing the book at somebody, especially when they're young people. And that through those restorative practices, really looking at whether or not that's an opportunity to fundamentally change hearts and minds. And one thing that I'll say that for all of the programming that I hope we're investing in at the county is we're spending much more of a resource on the evaluation component than we had before. And I think that's part of what we need to do because prevention is so challenging. And I know Mariko and others who run nonprofits know that really being able to drill down and determine whether or not prevention is meaningful is very challenging, but I think we can do that. I think we have to figure it out.
Great, thank you.
That's a great question. That's the question, Chappie, really.
Any other questions? I don't see other hands raised. So Supervisor Chavez, thank you so much for your presentation. This is your second one to one of my groups today. So
Yeah, happy to be here. And one request I'll make for both Mariko and Margaret, if they're comfortable, is when the final report comes out and we've taken a first pass at the partnerships, and I'd love to have that presented back to you and get some real-time feedback on 2 issues. I said 2, and you can tell it's late. I said I need 2 issues. Got 3 fingers up. And the 2 of them are, one would be how to prioritize what we approach. And the second is, what's the best way for us to engage cities? And I think one of the mistakes that we make at the county is that we don't do enough looking at what the cities are already doing so that we can match strategies. And I think that as it relates to hate crime, since this is a fresh body of work, that this is really an opportunity for us to do a much better job of coordinating and using each other's resources better. So if Margaret and Mariko are comfortable with that, I would love to get the prioritization and then any of the hows that you want to give us as well.
we'll definitely welcome you back for an update. Thank you.
All right. I appreciate all of you. Thanks for still being here. Keep up the good work. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Are there any members of the public who would like to comment on that item? And I don't see any hands raised. So we're going to go to the next item. So it's going to be the board priority local control. And it's a presentation on Life Moves and Service Enriched Shelter Loan Program. And Supervisor Joe Simitian is going to make the presentation. So welcome, Supervisor Simitian.
Hi, Chappie. Thanks. I just being added as a panelist here, so I'm rearranging my screen. Thank you. Whoops. Hang on. There we go. Now I can see you all. Thanks so much. Shall I just begin at the beginning, Chappie?
Yes, start from the beginning and take it from there.
All right. Well, thank you all very much. I'll try and cut right to the chase as well. With all of our 15 cities and towns, of course, the county has been struggling over these past many months and years to try new and innovative solutions to address the challenges of homelessness. And Supervisor Otto Lee and I were quite taken with the work of Life Moves. And one of the folks you see on your screen is Aubrey Merriman, who's going to raise his hand from Life Moves. Aubrey is the CEO and president there. And I think most of you know Life Moves has been doing good work up and down Santa Clara and San Mateo County for a good long time. But what they did in Mountain View that caught my attention, and I'm giving a little shout out to Margaret and her colleagues, what they did in Mountain View that caught our attention was really demonstrate the efficacy of using what many of us call containers. Aubrey doesn't like us to use that term, so I'll say modular units. But essentially, they're a really marvelous opportunity to do something more than, different than, better than the conventional shelter model that many of us have been struggling with for all these many years. And in Mountain View, literally in roughly 6 months' time from beginning to end of construction, the folks at Life Moves were able to pull in probably 100 units. I think the speed with which they can do this is really quite extraordinary. And for communities that have been struggling for a very long time to do more and do it more quickly, the Life Moves model really offers a lot of possibilities, both because we want to help folks who've been waiting too long for the help. And I know as council members, some of whom have 2-term limits, you're hoping that you can start giving a real meaningful response and demonstrate some progress to constituents who want to know why everything takes too darn long. So the Life Moves model is one that really does provide some speed. Because they are modular container-like structures, it provides a great deal of flexibility. You can go this way, you can go that, you can go up a couple of stories if you need to. The site in Mountain View, in fact, is a very oddly shaped site, and yet it has accommodated an awful lot of folks. Unlike the conventional group shelter, congregate shelter, folks can have their own units, so there's privacy and there's security. And I think that makes the model much more appealing to some folks who've been reluctant to get off the street. We saw the partnership in Mountain View, and Aubrey and his folks at Life Moves sort of issued a public challenge to go big, to try and multiply the number of sites up and down the valley. And so Otto and I just went to our board colleagues and were able to persuade them that we should put $40 million in one-time funding on the table, with up to $4 million a site in county support to help make these things go. My hope is that we will see, 10 to 12 of these up and down the valley sooner rather than later. Otto was determined that we make the money available on a first come, first served basis in order to try and create a little healthy competition and generate some interest in moving sooner rather than later. So for those of you who've been saying, you know what, we just can't figure out a solution that works for our community because you've got constraints, I really want to commend the Life Moves model to you. And why don't I turn it over to Aubrey with your permission, Chappie, and just let him say a word or two more about what they're offering. But as I say, we can provide up to $2.5 to $4 million of county funding. It's already been allocated if we can prevail upon local communities, that's all of you, obviously, to identify a site and say you want to be part of the solution. Can I go to Aubrey, Chappie? Is that okay?
That is okay.
Aubrey, over to you, and you'll have to deal with that muted mic there.
Thank you, Supervisor Simidian. Good evening, everybody. I appreciate your endurance, and I'm pleased to be here. I just want to reiterate that Life Moves really works in conjunction and integrated with the county's community plan to end homelessness, the fine team at the Office of Supporting Housing, Consuelo Hernandez and the team and others. And we feel that our quick strike modular solution is something that we are really proud of. We're proud of the cost efficiency, the rapid timeline, the flexible deployment, and the immediate impact that it has in the cities that we are looking to expand to, and in particular in Mountain View. We're grateful to then Mayor Kamei for her support and her partnership. One of the things that we look at when we bring our model together, and Life Moves for 40 years has been dedicated to helping homeless families, individuals and veterans return to stable housing and stability. So that's what we're about. And there's a vast space between somebody who's unsheltered that's living in an encampment to giving them their keys to a permanent supportive housing unit. And so our space is to try to move them throughput towards permanent supportive housing and more affordable housing. And so in order to do that, we have to get them off the street rapidly, and we have to customize support with intensive case management and behavioral health, and we have to continue to move them on to their next and better place. But in order to do that, our experience is that the sites that we build in neighborhoods, it's important for them to have a curb appeal. It's important for them to be integrated into the community. In Mountain View, as was discussed, it was 1 acre land, 6 or 7 months, 100 doors, 124 beds. 30% of that space is dedicated to supportive services, which is one of the hallmarks of our model. And we have 88 singles and couples and 12 families in an integrated interim supportive community in Mountain View. And we feel like it is a model that we want to scale. And one of our hopes is that we can engage in conversations with the various cities represented here throughout Santa Clara County, as Project Homekey offers a unique window that allows us to bring some of these communities online very quickly with the necessary funding capital to move this forward. Supervisor Simidian and Supervisor Lee were really incredible with picking up the mantle and taking that challenge on. And so that's what we try to do. We focus on throughput. Our cost per unit in Mountain View in particular, and I'll do it quickly because I know it's late and numbers may sound like the teacher in Charlie Brown right about now, if you can recall that. But the cost in total cost, capital cost to build was about $17.8 million. And that included the purchase of the land. In not every situation as a nonprofit, we're required to purchase the land, but in this situation we did because the opportunity was there. In other situations, if there's a vacant parcel of land that can be used and we can set it up to avoid some of the entitlements and achieve some of the CEQA exemption, we're able to move this quickly. The bill cost per door, if you take out the land cost, is about $160,000 per door. It gets up to about 180 to just under 200 when you factor in the cost of purchasing the land. The operating cost per night per person is $89 a night. The ongoing cost to operate this annually is just over $4 million a year. So this is where public-private partnerships come in, philanthropy comes in to help support the ongoing operational costs. As Supervisor Simitian said, the beauty of it is the flexible design that you can use. And you hear a lot about tiny homes, and tiny home communities are as valuable in terms of what they're doing to try to move people off the street. We think one of the unique features about the model that we like to put forth is that you can stack them. So you can create a lot of density in a smaller amount of space, that you can stack them and have 2 stories, 3 stories. So as we iterate, we're looking at having 2-story plans, 3-story plans as we move forward. I'll break here to see if you might have any questions. Before I do that, a lot of people ask, how long do the clients stay in our facilities, in our communities, and particularly in Mountain View? And we engage with our clients with the customized case management behavioral health plan. As long as they're engaged in the program and making a good faith effort to move themselves to more permanent supportive housing, then we work with them. Typically, you see a range of anywhere from 3 months to 6 months, depending on the level of trauma that they come to us with, because you can imagine when you're unsheltered on the streets, you accumulate a lot of trauma. So that's typically how long they stay in our program as part of the throughput process. Now, if at the 6-month mark, they're still leaning into their programs and they're making an effort to move forward, no invisible floor opens up and they fall through it. We continue to work with them. Oftentimes, some clients don't make it their first go around, so it takes them a couple times to sort of get the formula right, but that's what we're committed to doing. So the opportunity for you is, if there's land, if there's interest, I'd love to be able to continue the conversation with you as we gear up for HomeKey 2.0. And if there's other ways to fund or financially model this, I'd be open to having conversation with you about that as well.
Thank you, Aubrey. Looking for some hands. Mayor Elahi?
Thank you. Yeah, and congratulations. I think what you're doing is wonderful. I think this is a great project that you're engaged in. Could you describe a little bit about what the room looks like? How big sizes, what's available, how is it furnished, and all that?
Yeah, I thank you for asking. So prefabricated modular units, the rooms are typically around, they're usually 6 by 10 feet, and then it's a little bit larger in the family units. We're looking at, we take the modular units and we double them up or sometimes triple them up for the family units. Most of the units come with a bed, a desk, storage, an HVAC unit, and a lamp. This version of our HomeKey model is they have shared bathrooms, not in the units, but shared private bathrooms in the common space area for our singles and couples, but ensuite units for our families because they have children. And as we iterate this forward in our next models, all of our units are going to be built with ensuite bathrooms for our clients. The fundamental thing that we see, I call it, is the 4 Ps. when even the harder to shelter clients oftentimes are reluctant to come into the non-congregate shelter for very obvious reasons. Some of the things you see exaggerated on movies and other places. But when you address the 4 Ps, which is my people, my partner, my significant other, my children, then I want to know where my property is, because oftentimes I have my property in my tent or in my cart or in my vehicle. So what's going to happen to my property? And we have space to store that and hold on to property. You have pets. What's going to happen to my pet? My pet really is my family, right? And so they are my people for all intents and purposes. So we have dog kennels. You're allowed to have pets in our communities as well too. And then that 4th P, which is super important, is the privacy. The ability to have four walls, a roof, and a door that locks, that's your private space, is something that we feel is really appealing and really important, and adding a level of dignity for the clients that we're trying to serve.
That's wonderful. Thank you for doing it.
Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any other questions?
Chappie, I just want to share what I suspect some, but perhaps not all of the council members know. The popularity of the home key funding has sort of overwhelmed the state, I think. And so, we're not seeing some of the immediate opportunities that we had hoped for. But one of the reasons we wanted to present to you all, and I thank you for making the time tonight, everybody, is if you're asking yourself, well, is there a solution if we've got a quirky little piece of land? The answer is there is, and it can be quick and flexible, as you just heard, relatively affordable. They're not all going to be down at that price that Aubrey mentioned, but relatively affordable. And there's some starter funding already set aside, literally $2.5 to $4 million for each project at the county. So my hope is that other sources of funds, including those home key funds, will be available. But as I say, there's a program here that works, and at Life Moves, there's some starter funding that's already available. And so, if you've got the will and a piece of ground somewhere, I do hope you'll reach out.
Mhm.
Great. Thank you, Supervisor. Councilmember Watanabe.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Supervisor Sumiti and Aubrey, for being here this evening. Aubrey, I believe you came before the City of Santa Clara City Council and presented the Life Moves project, and we were all very impressed. And coincidentally enough, we had an email this morning from our Assistant City Manager that I pulled up because our staff did go out looking for property that might be available, city-owned property, and unfortunately, they have not been able to identify anything. However, what they are going to do is start to identify privately owned sites and off-market sites as possible sources, to look into, building a project like the one that's been built in Mountain View. The other thing is we have, as a city, created a homelessness task force, and we are currently getting residents to apply for that task force and be able to take all of this information for them to use in moving forward. So I'll make sure that they have this information that's been presented tonight and as an asset and to move forward and hopefully get us going a little bit sooner rather than later. One thing, the Bella Vista property that was a home key project that they are actually going to start working on that next month and hope to be done by the end of the year. It's going to provide 67 units of interim housing. So we are very excited about that. So thank you for all of your support on that project.
Thank you for sharing that. And I appreciate the way your city is leaning into this opportunity. We are in a crisis, as everybody knows, right? It doesn't take a snowstorm in your backyard in the middle of July in Gilroy to realize that climate change is an issue for all of us, much the same way that it doesn't take a homeless encampment to pop up in your front lawn to realize that homelessness is an issue that impacts all of us.
Thank you, Mayor Klein.
Yes, thank you, Supervisor Sumitian and Aubrey, for being here. Two quick questions. First, Supervisor Smidian, how is the $2 to $4 million earmarked? Can it be used for anything from the site standpoint?
We have a set of program guidelines, as I'm sure you can imagine, and I'd be happy to send it to you. They're relatively detailed, and I don't want to take up that much time, but I think there's a fair amount of flexibility, Mr. Mayor, and we had initially, Otto and I had come in with a $2.5 million number, and when we finally wrestled it to the ground, we said we need to put more in on a site-by-site basis, or, so 2.5 became the minimum, 4 became the maximum, and I will not impose the lengthy guidelines on everybody, but there's a fair amount of flexibility. And Aubrey, you've negotiated some of these with our staff. Do you want to offer anything in the way of direction on how that 4 million could be used if somebody was tapping into it?
Yeah, and I'll try to keep it brief, but there is flexibility, and there is the ability to look at it for capital, some operational. It ends up being, it could be set up like it's a forgivable loan, and I emphasize forgivable because it really is, as long as you're hitting the criteria that's established there. And then when you look at that, in combination with the home key funding, the federal pass-through funds that help subsidize a lot of the capital work, the financial model becomes really appealing from an incentive standpoint to work with this. So, Mr. Mayor, I'm happy to follow up with you separately, or for all of you, if that's an interest point, to provide more detail around that when you are have more time.
And Larry, even though I no longer have the privilege of representing Sunnyvale, I'll ask my staff who's on this call to get you the guidelines tomorrow, okay?
Yes. And Joe, you're still on the hook for the rest of this year. So don't jump away too quick.
No. They told us that they take effect immediately. I'm bummed, but there it goes. But I'm still yours, man. Not to worry.
Thank you. And Aubrey, second question, it's like, I appreciate what your organization's doing. I worked with several of your members, I guess it was a year ago, more so. And at that point, you said that you were only looking for 2-acre sites. That doesn't seem to be the case anymore. And so what are you looking for land use or size of sites that make the project feasible?
Yeah, and we were looking at economies of scale, but we realize now with such scarcity of land, I always tell people it's amazing what we're able to do with an acre of land in 8 months, right? What can happen with that? So we would look at, in terms of sort of economies of scale, an acre. We have experience with building up in an acre. The more space we can get to, the more we can build, right? And the more people we're able to serve. So I would say the floor is an acre, but if you are getting close to an acre and there's an opportunity, we're willing to take a good, long, hard look at it for sure.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you.
And thank you, Councilmember Abakoga.
Thank you. And thank you, Supervisor and Aubrey, for being here. As from being from Mountain View, I'm really proud of the project. And it was quite a labor of love. We worked really quickly. We had like 4 days to get that application in back in 2020. But what I wanted to highlight was the partnership. And, in particular, what I appreciated was it was city, and then, Life Moves, the nonprofit. But we also actually had Ferris Regis, I believe, the developer, come in and actually help with the construction piece, because, the city doesn't do construction and a nonprofit doesn't. So I think that, that's something that I wanted to highlight, the real partnership there, and that, the private developer would come in and work with us was really very much appreciated. But moving forward, these modulars were, frankly, a new type of housing. So we had to figure out a lot of things, and, our staff had to work on figuring out, how this is going to work. So, happy to just offer that if there's any questions on the from the city side of what it took from the city to make this happen, we're happy. We're here to assist. We we want to replicate this and, hopefully make it easier for other cities to do a project too. Thanks.
Thank you for sharing that. And I just got to say that the partnership with the city sort of is a real manifestation of what can happen if you're innovative and creative in your thinking and that you come together. Sarah's a number of professionals, Sarah Regis was a development manager. We had an architect, structural engineer, Charles Blozes, and we had, BK Construction. So there was a lot of leaning in, and all of that partnership and collaboration led by the city of Mountain View conspire together in a good way to give birth to what you're seeing there. So it really does take that. And my ultimate, one of my vision points is to have, a network of similar communities in communities across Santa Clara County, much the same way as you have public libraries, right? They're integrated in communities. They're helping with visible homelessness. They can be an asset to the neighborhood. And there's the political will that opens the door that says, yes, we want something here.
Great. Thank you. Mayor Burt?
Yeah, well, thanks, Joe and Aubrey, for the presentation. As you know, after we saw the Mountain View project, we were very impressed with it and basically moved forward rapidly to try to identify city land, which is, we have a very limited amount of available city-owned land, but we were able to come up with a parcel and pushed it forward on a number of hurdles we had to go through to get the city approvals for this in rapid order. The county contribution was extremely critical to making it happen. We opted to go for a 2-story structure in large part so that we could have a lot more family units. And I do want to say that one of the great things about Life Moves project is all of the support services that they provide, which are what, as Aubrey had talked about, those are essential to the folks who enter this program then being able to go into permanent housing, and they have a great batting average on this. And so we all, as a partnership, raced forward to get our application in, and we were all expecting that the state would come through quickly on the grant, in part because the governor came and did the ribbon cutting in Mountain View and said it was the model for the state. And we are all still waiting for the grant. And unfortunately, that's not happening as fast as we hope, but we still have our fingers crossed. And the other part of this is after this, on average, 9-month transitional period for clients there, where do they go? And Life Moves has projects. We're really glad that we're seeing that we have a project that's just come forward that'll take a little while to assemble the funds, but very low and extremely low income housing for individuals and families. So there's a real alignment there. And then the other thing is that this project has enough capacity that it's really going to be able to exceed our in-city needs within probably a couple of cohorts that move through the system. We have other unhoused people in surrounding communities who we think are going to be able to benefit from the same program. But I will say that in the end, in part because of the family housing component, our costs, I think, were over $300,000 a unit, even though we provided the land, but we still think it's the best program that we've seen by a long shot, and we support it. So thanks.
Thank you, Mayor Burns. Though you've helped us navigate to the point where we can be able to submit it. And a lot of people look at the application submission, but they don't understand the level of navigation and collaboration and partnership that it takes to get to that point. Oftentimes, you can get caught up into thinking that's the victory right there. But we're excited about the work that is coming around the corner in Palo Alto. It's 88 doors, 24 family units, 64 individuals, ensuite bathrooms, 2 stories. Again, we build in that 30%, supportive services, community space. So as we iterate on this model, we're going to learn, we're going to get better, and we're going to replicate in more successful ways. So we're excited about what that can mean. And we just happen to live in a very, competitive, people are understanding what this window is at Homekey. And so we are part of a groundswell of very worthy applications that went in. And so we're hoping to get this secondary wave of support. And we look to hear maybe this month as to how we move forward. But to you and the city council to be able to socialize this and bring this in, and the recognition that there's an opportunity there, and there's a recognition that just imagine what a statement it would be to be able to build something like this in Palo Alto, right? In Palo Alto.
Thank you very much. I don't see any other hands raised. So Aubrey and Supervisor Simitian, thank you so much for the presentation. Lots of good information, good news that we're hearing. So it's very exciting.
Thank you so much, Chappie, and to all of the members. And I can't resist the opportunity on my way off the screen to say, Joanne Benjamin, you are a glutton for punishment. It's good to see you again.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you, everybody. Have a great evening. And I hope that we'd be working with you soon here.
Thanks.
Great. Thanks. All right. Are there any members of the public who would like to comment on that item? I don't see any hands raised. So we're on to the next item, the Legislative Committee update. Councilmember Pfleger.
Thank you, President Jones. And I will try to be brief. We had our Legislative Action Committee meeting before the board meeting, and we had 3 big items. We heard from the Silicon Valley Clean Energy CEO and their legislative director on some of the climate change legislation, energy and decarb legislation that we can look forward to and possibly support this year. And I know they'll be coming back to the full board at a future meeting. We also got a quick overview from Melanie Perron with Cal Cities, giving us a preview of what to expect, not just as to energy and decarb legislation, but just a quick overview of Cal Cities priorities this year and what they expect. And of course, as we move forward with future LAC meetings, we will go into more detail as more bills come online. And then the third item, President Jones, which is actually a recommendation to the full board to send a letter of support of Assembly Bill 1944. And this is a local representative, Assembly Member Alex Lee's bill, whereby it proposes to modernize the Brown Act that will allow each jurisdiction to determine whether or not they will have their members list publicly their private residence address if those individuals are meeting at their homes or at any other private space. Part of that proposal would actually require that an in-person meeting place be provided, just to allow members of the public, if they need to address the board or the city council or whatever body it is, they would be able to do so. And so that is the recommendation. The vote was, most members were in support. A couple of us abstained. And so that's what I'm bringing from the LAC meeting, President Jones. It's a recommendation for the full board to send a letter of support of Assembly Bill 1944.
All right.
And I will look for a motion after we've had any questions or discussion.
Okay. Mayor Paul.
I just have a suggestion that we vote on this next month, because I think because it has such a procedural impact on all of our cities and all jurisdictions, I would really like to see what my city and particularly our Legislative Review Committee would have to say about this. So if this were to come up today, I would vote against it. But that's because I haven't had a chance to fully vet it through our city. I know that we had the speech last time about being representatives of our city and, thinking for, this particular body. But I think this is important enough that we should get this vetted, just from my own perspective, by our individual jurisdictions. Thanks.
Thank you. Councilmember Flicker, are there any timing issues on our vote?
A couple things to respond to Darcy. One, this would be the bill, if it passes, it's not an urgency bill, so it would go through the normal process. It would not take effect until AB 361 that allows us to continue working remotely, provided there's an emergency in place. So it would not take effect until such emergency orders are lifted. So it would not immediately impact Cupertino or any other city. I know Assemblymember Lee really wanted to get as much support of his bill to help drive it through Sacramento. And so this, and another thing I will add, I actually sent an email, I think last week, to give everybody a heads up that we'd be bringing this forward to the extent they had time to reach out to their legislative subcommittee. And then the last thing I will say is, if a council member, a director on this board does not feel comfortable, they can always abstain. But right now it's a preliminary vote. As this bill, like other bills, evolve, I imagine that we would bring it back to the board for further consideration.
And Chair, if I may.
Yes.
I will note that we just voted not too long ago, earlier in this meeting, to extend the AB 361 allowance by another month. So I would still ask that we provide proper time. And I do respect and appreciate the week-long heads up, but that just wasn't long enough for our LRC to convene at that point. So, and I also think that the bill itself may well benefit by some vetting and suggestions. So thanks.
Okay.
And I would join in that request for a delayed vote.
Okay. Well, right now we haven't had a motion to draft the letter. So if we don't have a motion, then by default, we'll have to delay it. Mayor Burt?
I'll just say that I concur with Peter and Darcy. It's an interesting bill that we may very well support, but I think we need to vet it a little bit.
Okay. Good input.
So if that's the case, then I would make a motion then that we delay a vote until our next meeting.
Is that really, if we don't have a motion?
We don't need to. So
by default, it would be delayed, but actually Mayor Walea had her hand up. So Mayor?
Thank you, Vice Mayor Jones. I was just going to comment that in principle, I do agree with what has been said by Mayor Byrd, by Councilmember Flagler and Councilmember Lero Munoz. I would like to also, even though I agree with this, I think, but I haven't read it. I'm not a legal person. So in principle, I do agree that I would appreciate at every opportunity that I have the time to vet it through my city. So I would be supporting that we wait.
Okay.
Thank you.
Councilmember, well, if we don't have a motion, or Peter, if you want to make the motion, you can. I don't think it's necessary, but if you want to move forward with that motion.
Well, I mean, if we don't make a motion, then wouldn't it just drop off our agenda? So I would want to bring it back specifically for a vote at our next meeting.
Technically, it's a motion to continue. That's probably the best way to handle it. If you want to have it still in the hopper, as it were. Alternatively, you could table it, but that's really not what you're talking about. It's a motion to continue.
Then I would move to for this item to be continued to a future meeting.
I'll second Peter's motion. Darcy.
All right. So we have a motion and a second, and Mayor, I'm sorry for Walea.
No worries. It's Walea. I just wanted to check before we started voting on it. So would we get a letter before that, so that we can vet it through our city? there was talk earlier of what letter, what language would be in the letter. So do we get that before the next meeting? How are we going to proceed? Just wanted to get that clarification out before voting.
Yeah, so if we're voting to continue it, then there wouldn't be a letter drafted ahead of time. Because the vote would be to draft a letter of support.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Councilmember Fliger?
Thank you. And just to add to that, President Jones, and our standard letter of support, Mayor Walia, really would say, especially our support letters, it just says, as a cities association, we support the bill for X reasons. I think our letters in opposition to bills go into more detail where we take position or recommend changes. So the letter of support is normally a very basic letter. And then the second thing, just a point of clarification on when we bring the bill back. If I heard correctly, at least one director wanted the bill to be vetted more in Sacramento before we bring it back. And I don't think that will happen in the next month. So I will use my discretion on when we bring the bill back for our future meeting.
Thank you, Nisa, for that clarification. Very helpful.
Thank you. All right. If there's no more discussion on that, we have a motion and a second. Auden?
I'm really sorry, Chair. Can I interject before we do that?
Go ahead.
I think the motion explicitly said to bring it back next month. So I would be fine as the seconder of the motion to provide that flexibility, but I think we should probably check in with the movement to make sure that formally, that motion is modified to give Nisa the flexibility to bring it back when she sees that the issue is ripe again to discuss. I think
that's fine. I thought I mentioned that, yeah, future meeting, but yes, we'll certainly give Nisa the flexibility that she needs. Absolutely.
Okay, well, if that's what you originally said, then I apologize for the misunderstanding. I thought you had said
no worries.
Next month specifically. So thanks.
All right. Thank you. All right, Auden?
Okay, I will now call the roll. Abakoga?
Aye.
Abakoga, aye. Watanabe?
Aye.
Watanabe, aye. Mock?
Aye.
Mock, aye. Paul?
Yes.
Paul, aye. Constantine?
Aye.
Constantine, aye. Bert?
Yes.
Bert, aye. Klein?
Aye.
Klein, aye. Jones?
Aye.
Jones, aye. Bybee? Bybee is absent. Montano?
Aye.
Montano, aye. Sayak?
Aye.
Sayak, aye. Elahi?
Aye.
Elahi, aye. Laron Munoz?
Aye.
Laron Munoz, aye. Fliger?
Yes.
Fliger, aye. And Walia?
Aye.
Walia, aye with 14 ayes and 1 absent. The motion carries.
All right, thank you. On to the next item, which is the Santa Clara County City Managers Association update, and Sarah Zarate will give us that update. Welcome, Sarah.
Thank you. Good evening to everyone. I'll make this pretty quick. On February 9th, the Santa Clara County Managers Association met and they discussed the following. Under COVID-19 updates, they talked about teleworking and hybrid policies and agreed to share existing policies with one another. There was a discussion around potential meeting topics for this year, and they included post-pandemic talent retention and recruitment challenges, new city council orientation best practices, housing issues, voting trends, labor negotiations, state budget and legislative impacts this legislative session, and lessons learned from the implementation of the City of San Jose's city roadmap. Lastly, the group is planning to meet in person at their next meeting in April. End of report.
Great, thank you, Sarah. Next is the Executive Director update, and Joanne will give us that update.
Thank you for all being here, and in the interest of time, I will pass on anything else and let you adjourn.
All right. Thank you, Joanne. All right. Last but definitely not least, our joys and challenges. Does anyone have any, particularly joys? We could probably pass on the challenges, but let's hear some joys. Does anybody have any joys they want to share? Nisa?
Thanks, Shafi. I just want to invite everyone to the Cal Cities Peninsula Division event on March 16th at the new Los Altos Community Center. It's a lunch event from 11:30 a.m. to 1 p.m. And I'll ask Joanne or Auden to send out the invite to everyone on this call. Our very own Chappie, President Jones will be one of the main speakers. And the topic is infrastructure. Chappie, I don't know if you want to elaborate, but it is going to be a very informative, and I'll use the word exciting event based on what I expect Chappie and the other speakers will cover.
Great, thank you. Any other joys? Challenges? So this is not really a joy or a challenge, but I really miss meeting with everyone in person. So we're going to start to have a discussion on meeting in person. Don't have any specifics on the timeline, but I know that a lot of value comes out of this organizations when we meet in person and see everybody face to face. So just want to put that on your radar that we will be having those discussions. And on that note, if there's nothing else, this meeting is adjourned. Have a good evening, everyone.
Thank you all.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you.